Well, welcome to the 700 Club. President Trump is meeting with congressional leaders from both parties again today, but it doesn't look like there's any resolution in sight to the battle over funding for the president's border wall.
The meeting comes after the president brought out Border Patrol agents to help make his case for a wall. Jennifer Wishon brings us the story from Washington.
It's day 14 of the partial government shutdown. While talks remain open, both sides are dug deep into their respective trenches. In a surprise appearance to the White House press briefing room,
Happy New Year to everybody.
President Trump brought firsthand witnesses to back up his case. Border Patrol agents willing to suffer through a shutdown to gain a physical barrier at the border.
I promise you that if you interview Border Patrol agents, they will tell you that walls work. I worked in Naco, Arizona for 10 years. We didn't have physical barriers in Naco, and illegal immigration and drug smuggling was absolutely out of control.
You all got to ask yourself this question. If I come to your home, do you want me to knock on the front door? Or do you want me to climb through that window?
The president followed up by tweeting this dramatic video that includes a past message from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Illegal immigration is wrong, plain and simple.
The shutdown is only because of the 2020 presidential election. For them, strictly politics, the president tweeted, feeling emboldened by his base.
I have never had so much support as I have in the last week over my stance for border security, for border control, and for, frankly, the wall or the barrier.
Across town, Nancy Pelosi reclaimed the Speaker's gavel for the first time in 8 years. Her new House majority passed legislation to reopen most of the government and buy more time to negotiate funding with the White House for Homeland Security. But for now, Democrats aren't budging on the president's demands for wall funding.
The fact is, a wall is an immorality. It's not who we are as a nation.
The House legislation is nearly identical to what the Senate passed before Christmas, but Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says that's now out the window because it won't pay for the wall.
The Senate will not take up any proposal that does not have a real chance of passing this chamber and getting a presidential signature.
As this standoff continues, on day one of the new Congress, 2 veteran House Democrats introduced articles of impeachment against President Trump, while new Muslim Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, the first Palestinian-American woman in Congress, cursed the president in her call for impeachment. And in an interview with NBC News, Speaker Pelosi says she won't rule out the possibility of impeachment or indictment, but says she's waiting for Special Counsel Robert Mueller's final report. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Well, welcome to a new year in Washington, and the division seems to be even wider, and the radicalization seems to be even stronger. But there is a new player back in the Speaker's chair, and here's what her daughter had to say. This is a quote from Nancy Pelosi's daughter. "She can cut off your head and you won't even know you're bleeding." So we're in for a whole new 2-year run here until the 2020 elections. Will the government stay shut down for that period of time? I don't know, but I don't see any solution in any kind of near term. Now more than ever, we need to pray for our government and pray that the divisions that are so obvious somehow get healed. I don't see any solution other than an absolute miracle. Well, in other news, the economy was very strong in 2018. The jobs report out today was absolutely fantastic. But there's another report that says the outlook may not be as good for the coming year. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. Another sign of an economic slowdown as a key index for American manufacturers and factories grew at the slowest rate in 2 years. The drop in the index is still another indication that slower growth in China and Europe is also hurting the U.S. economy. The weaker economy in China is sending other signals like fewer iPhone sales. The stock market has been falling in recent weeks, with investors anticipating a slowdown in the months ahead, even though for now the economy seems strong with unemployment still very low. Well, a new president took power in Brazil this week, and he's promising to do whatever it takes to make a dent in the country's years-long out-of-control crime. Chuck Holton visited Rio de Janeiro and went on patrol with an elite team of Brazilian Special Operations Police who are leading the move to take down the drug gangs.
Rival drug gangs battling for territory across Brazil have driven its murder rate to more than 60,000 per year. In the poorest communities, called favelas, a young man there is more likely to die by gunfire than a soldier in an active war zone. This young mother of two asked that we not reveal her name.
Our main problem is all the violence. Sometimes I can't even take my kids to school or even my baby to the hospital if he's sick. When we're at the house and the shooting starts outside, I'm already teaching my children to lie down on the floor and not move. Stray bullets are very common here.
Fed up with the violence, in October 2018, the Brazilian people elected a new president, Jair Bolsonaro, a former army captain who promised to take a tough stance on crime. Bolsonaro is committed to stepping up enforcement in the worst neighborhoods, even sending troops into the favelas to take on the gangs. One of the most elite and well-armed police units is known as BOPE.
The mission of BOPE is to act in situations where the local police cannot. For example, hostage situations, combating drug dealers, and protecting the population through specialized operations. Despite being a military force, we are actually part of the police, and we use specialized equipment and weapons.
This favela that they're training in today is one that they've already cleared, so we know that it's safe. But you can see the tactical way that they learn to move, and that's because you don't really know who the bad guys are until they're shooting at you. And as you can see, there are women and children in here, and they have to go right by all these civilians. And the level of training that it takes to keep from shooting people that don't need to be shot is really high.
Our first priority is to always protect the lives of the citizens. We must be very aggressive, however, because the sheer amount of violence in the areas where we operate. Victory for us is going into battle against these gangs, who often bring superior numbers, and winning without losing any of our men.
But for the people living in these favelas, victory might simply look like making it home safely one more day. From Rio de Janeiro, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Chuck, thank you. Well, in Israel, politicians are forming new alliances in preparation for early elections coming up in a few months in April. The turmoil could also affect U.S.-Israeli relations and President Trump's yet-to-be-revealed peace plan. CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell looks at what to expect from the upcoming changes.
Israel's political system is gearing up for the April elections.
So there's a lot of musical chairs in Israeli politics. Lots of parties splinter off, form new parties.
One shift, Education Minister Naftali Bennett and Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked are starting a religious secular party called the New Right. Another key member, they're now joined by author and columnist Carolyn Glick. The biggest surprise came on live TV when Labour Party leader Avi Gabay ended his alliance with Tzipi Livni's Hatanua party in what some called a divorce. One goal unites left-wing parties: defeat Netanyahu. According to Professor Eugene Kontorovich, that's not likely to happen.
When you look at the polls, there's really no way any left-wing coalition can form a government. But I think very likely the results of the elections, when all is said and done, is going to be a continuation of very much something like the current coalition.
A wild card could be if Netanyahu is indicted before the elections on corruption charges. Legally, he can still run, and if indicted after the elections, would not be forced to step down. It's hard to know how that might affect voting. According to Professor Ephraim Inbar, the Israeli swing to the right is largely due to the failed peace process.
After the Oslo peace process failed, the Israeli electorate became more cautious and blames basically the labor and the left.
Early elections will likely further delay details of President Trump's Israeli-Palestinian peace plan.
President Trump's plan is very optimistic. He's taking a shot, but I think the chances that the Palestinians will accept this plan are basically zero. They've said so already. So it doesn't matter too much what government there is in Israel when any Palestinian government is going to reject it.
The Palestinians have Hamas. The only deal they are ready to accept is the Jews in the sea. So they want to destroy the Jewish state. You know, what kind of deal can we make when part of the national Palestinian movement has this type of attitude.
Though unnamed sources indicate Trump prefers a Netanyahu-led government, analysts agree U.S.-Israel relations should remain strong in any case.
Netanyahu was successful having a bumpy but correct relationship with President Obama. So we will adapt ourselves to whatever government there is in Washington.
One of the most important things about this election is if 2020 brings with it a different president who is likely to have a much more critical policy towards Israel, much more resembling that of President Obama, having a government that is prepared to stand up to that, to not buckle under the great pressure that they will undoubtedly be placed in, will be very important.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Gordon, it's hard to believe, but with all those shifting alliances, it makes the politics here in the U.S. look rather tame.
I don't know how tame politics is here in the U.S., but Israeli politics is remarkably complicated. And a whole political system that has multiple parties and multiple alliances, and things just keep getting reformed and remade. The good news is this upcoming April election will be free of U.S. interference. The last time they stood for election, Obama was actively campaigning against Netanyahu. He wanted to get a peace deal done before the end of his presidency, and he thought Netanyahu was in the way. So he was trying to get him removed from office. So that's not going to happen, but we'll see what happens. The prediction is the government's going to stay as is. The coalition may change, but Netanyahu will stay in as prime minister, and we'll see if that happens.